nice to take a part in the symposium. Actually, it's my first time ever to present something public or like open, like for a larger audience. Mostly I just teach with smaller groups, and my talk is with less people involved. I would like to present today some research by design based, mostly the work, which is overlaps with teaching as well, where I integrate as well my teaching, my research into the teaching and experiment are overlapping from multiple sides. So the first part of my talk, I would like to more reference to some research which is done over years since 2010 from the first project until the end. The first part I would like to concentrate on ecology as a design issue, as well on discrete in terms of compositional principle and constructing this discrete using digital design techniques, and as well figuration as a topic which has influenced me a lot as a second step. The last part of the talk will be related more closer to the architecture, where I will touch Ungars, Oscar Matthias Ungars, by the research which I'm doing now. So, first project is from 2010 and it continued a little bit. I wanted to introduce the design technique, like using the swarms from the first, not in terms of like having like algorithm directly, but having multiple ways of designing. So, designing the element in itself and using the algorithm and overlapping them both and researching what it could give us. So here, like through having very simple looking into the swarms from lines until the point, until the end, and then designing the element, which is extremely simple, has just 90 degrees. The length is changing, and all kind of idea having this autonomous element, which is informed through the choreography of different sites and could become as an architectural covering structure. This design was a large experiment for me and for our studio with Daniel in Lab LEDS as a beginning, where we research on this, having not specific direct algorithm, but also mixing with designing the element and bringing these two both overlapping techniques together. So it was really interesting to see that folks as an architectural external maybe thought was to embrace this as a space and bring the ecology of these multiple directionalities into the architecture. One project I would like to show where I more searched the connections for one workshop in Vilnius Art Academy, connecting and searching something that is specific by understanding the digital and looking to the through the contemporary thought, look to the something specific in our culture in Lithuania, where I really find interesting with the performance of dancing trajectories, singing and weaving textiles it's merged together. So this different layers I understand as a design issue. As is one compositional element is a creature which has a cloth and gesture. Through the movements, it has parts which are dependent on some trajectories. So we look to the dancing patterns, dancing diagrams, and started to translate it into the autonomous compositions, which are actually having integrated behavior. They are flexible, but they are all the same. And by having multiple of them, this directionality and trajectories overlaps as a thought for structure, as a thought for covering structure. It could be as an architectural part, as an external, for example, thought. So this issue at the beginning, like we overlapping these autonomous elements, seeing them as behaviors, and having specific connection directionalities through the dance, like these trajectories, was trying to translate it. It became completely abstract, but on some moments was really interesting to experiment with this and somewhere to recognize as well a digital approach, what it brings. So here not exactly taking one-to-one this dancing, but trying these trajectories to compose one autonomous element and bring with many and look in a relation with many what it happens, and as well treat this as it would be a dance in the composition of autonomous composition with some repulsion and attraction, and seeing this as a potential for architecture. As a second experiment as well is related to having single simple elements. Landscape roofs, we call this workshop, where we produce it at first as an influence from some architecture elements. We took the studies for the roofs, studies for the roofs of traditional structures where very collective architecture through very simple methods meets. It will come to the slide after. So here, as you see as well, the elements which are very simple, they are not merged produced on a specific surface through the resonance with each other, through the vibration to each other, and having a simple vibrance inside. This relation based of single elements, simple ones, is for us important as a characteristic, as an influence into the form which is coming after. And of course, recognizing this and composing it later. So the starting point, it was connected to those roofs as a studies, and this I have to go faster and show just the results. I wanted to show these experiments, also understanding parts of a building, like roofs or rhythms in simple architectural examples, which we can influence and use it today, creating those elements as a covering structures. And these experiments, which I show now, was the first part for laboratory, dealing with this simple elements and bringing to them some kind of life, or as a design issue through the characteristics and distances in between them, how we behave to each other. Through these experiments, influencing us and searching what could be in this time, yet what I'm showing is much more like experiment-based. So this resonance, vibrance between, for us, is like a characteristic, and it's important. And to the work as well, like always thinking about autonomous and figurations. Figuration topic merge here, where testing one and looking at it at the very beginning, it looks a bit simple and reminds like a surface-based design. But here the structures having always autonomous element and very low cost, just 200 euro the whole installation. By testing this as well was a thought to have a complex, interesting directionality through the movement of the textile and stabilizing in itself. So this experiment brought us as well thinking on a characteristic level what this autonomous element could bring and where it could bring. It's in some time as searching for structure and stabilization, in this case is interlocking to each other, and having this, by exchanging an element, it could bring completely different thought as well for the organizational principle of structures. The one was before interlock, and the second one is an experiment with having more figurative element, which is not defined exactly for the position. It has a lot of freedom, but through being able to be recognized by many, so using digital libraries of these many is through the many, it overlaps and stacks and stabilizes in itself, so it's completely other characteristics are emerging. Here I recognize the potential to have it already as a figurative element, which is already embracing the space, not being just specific as one surface condition or covering structure. I see it more spatial. Coming back to architecture, was really interesting to see the Daniel's approach in this book. We're reading here, Ludwig Himmelsheimer. It impressed me to look in that way through understanding and having experiments in digital thought to look what the elements could bring forward if you look to the history of architecture. So in Ungars, I really was interested to find these 7 diagrams explaining organizational orders of a simple element for understanding in this Ungars time. For him is like inside-outside diagrams, embracing space and having not a precise definition what each one is. It could be the room or the part of a city. Other organizational principles are types of organizations he called these diagrams. The one which I wanted to look at this and to really to explore it more through the understanding, neurological understanding, to look it through the digital design and bring the thought further. Like this enfilade or gallery type, labyrinth, or different types of space organizations. I see it here not necessary for having room in a room like framing structure, but like embracing elements, the spaces, embracing them through these thoughts and merging together into one interiority where there is no strong definition what is inside and out, and understanding this as internal and external organizational matters where the building interiorities and with the square of exterior is overlapping together. So such arrangements was as an experiment to the reflection of these diagrams, which could be as a beginning to think about the extension of a simple element. And here the discrete is more like a space between these elements, where sometimes it loses themselves in the labyrinth type of arrangement, but as well in enfilade type of, it has still sequences of a room. At the same time, looking to the Ungars studies, seeing this as internal logics, continuing them through the steel in itself of its logic into bringing them to the large arrangements, to the large city blocks, as a simple elements as well, looking through the elements also and taking the parts of a building and assembling them into large arrangements. It seems like these parts and the whole here in this time is dependent of the industry and these elements, or like in this case is rooms as a cells. Today we don't have, through the diversity today of products, and we have another possibilities to think and to design. The objects doesn't have to be like plates, simple plates, or simple, it could be and doesn't have to be, and the orders through the experience of this having one and many and testing them in digital, it brings us really a lot of ideas to have a more complex, more interesting arrangements, more special ones from this one. So the products today is really diverse and doesn't have to be so simple, and through the internal logics of the geometry at the moment where I showed you some studies, the arrangements becomes more spatial. They are open and without strict definition about the boundaries of the building. In these kind of very much sculptural objects, sculptural assemblance of many, I see as well it could be as a structure or as a unit, as a building scale, where different scales brings me different ideas through these experiments with the students. If the element, the one, is in thinking in the relation one and many, it's always experiment starts with the groups, the smaller groups where the ideas like bottom-up approach, you start to experiment with one group out of several and seeing the geometrical properties. It brings the idea to connect larger groups, and at the end, this one particle relation here, I see it as a sequence of design method, which brings every time keeping one method or following one method with your own ideas for at first a geometrical part. It brings ideas for the larger arrangements as a different appearances of compositional principle. Looking back to the Ungars, where the types in his diagrams is perceived, I see it not like cut it as a building or in some kind of grid. It's always combination from one into many. And here we see analyzing the situations into the city through the simple element in a combination of one in relation how the clothes come together, the different conditions appears in architecture. And here, even it's a simple parts as buildings arranged in a larger arrangement, the diversity is tried to achieve. So today we can see it much more different, in my opinion. This part in a relation doesn't have to have we have more diverse products and diverse possibilities to create this one, and in a relation of many, the different figurations could be appeared and achieved. Thinking about this one, not just like a separate object, but separate element, but always in a relation of few, and then which kind of architectural properties it could bring. So like in Ungar's diagrams, like a building mass as a one figurative mass, here it appears, and having the several or one, and having very slight shifts between the one in relation to many, and thinking in this smaller groups, it disappears, because it doesn't matter anymore in this case when you have three, and if one is created thinking through the parts, like in this case one flattice in this settlement project is consist of parts as a rooms. So while they are three, maybe it's just like 9 rooms. Here, having these different types of arrangements, through using this one and thinking in many at once, we have a different architectural conditions as a building mass and different arrangement possibilities. Here, this project, I would like, the last one, I would like to go more deeper into the detail of having through many and thinking about the groups and grouping them and letting them a certain degree of freedom. These groups could also, with having a certain grid in digital, they can, again, as I started with this dancing example, not in terms of dancing with each other, but they recognize themselves and they lay on each other. And using these moments in relation to each other, those larger groups, we have in between situations of a small, simple parts, like elements, like in this case, they are all the same as the sticks, but the arrangement of them in relation of many is designed in that way they could become a structural parts for covering the building. And this is the last image I would like to end up, where we have a situation where we can enter the situation where we are embraced between those parts, and between these many elements, and having this particle relation in the structural part.
Thank you, Rasa, for the talk. We will directly continue.